Let's do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Honesty Podcast. So, my name is Matthew Wesley, and this is our first guest of all time on episode 1, Lex Gillon. And basically, I'll give you a little bit of a background about the Honesty Podcast and the reason for it. So, essentially, I would say that the purpose of this podcast is to kind of highlight the extraordinary element in the ordinary person.
Sure.
So, I mean, we have a lot of podcasts, like Joe Rogan's podcast, which is amazing. It's definitely influenced me in this decision to make my own. And I feel like from the people that I've met in different countries and different places, they've added an element to myself. And I feel that this podcast, the purpose of it is to identify these important people, their key traits, how they're different, and bring it to life, you know, for the everyday person to listen to, and take a sample of it as if it's a recipe, you know. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Lex Gillon. So, Lex, would you like to introduce yourself to the people?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alex Gillon, go by Lex. Originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I lived in China for a while, traveled all through Asia, and now I'm here in Berlin, trying out my hand at cryptocurrency, blockchain, and all that buzzword shit.
Yeah.
So trying to learn about the tech scene and coming into the space.
Lovely. So for example, I remember when we first met, you were kind of quiet about your entrepreneurial side of things. And one thing I wanted to say is you're an entrepreneur, you're creating your own company, and you're creating a company in an element of business that people all know, but don't necessarily talk about on a regular basis. So would you like to expand on what you're working on?
Sure.
And where you would like to go with your concept?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm working on a business called Modality, and it deals in the sex industry, specifically sex tech.
Yeah.
So the company effectively is a sex tech intelligence and governance, firm. So in layman's terms, we help sex toy companies get intelligence on their consumers, and we're trying to standardize the whole industry so that it can be more safe for people who use dildos and all that jazz.
So how did you get into that? That's something that's very interesting, because I can imagine that maybe 99% of the people who even want to watch this will probably have watched porn or watch whatever, you know. It's a very open thing. Well, it's very closed, right?
Yeah.
But it's maybe you don't talk about it you obviously don't talk about it with your parents, you don't talk about it with your friends necessarily. It's a private thing. So how did you go from your university background to then going into the porn kind of industry? How did that develop?
Well, it's not just porn, but I'll get to that a little bit later. So basically, I was in college. I studied Chinese at Yale, and I was randomly studying abroad in France, actually. And at the time, I was joking around with a friend, I don't really want to do anything in China or in Chinese, not really. I don't know what I like. And she's like, well, what do you like? And I'm like, well, I like sex. And I like sports, and I'm not going to be a professional athlete. So that's kind of how we started thinking about sex as an industry. Plus, when I was really young, I was like, oh, well, I don't want one of those Bill Clinton style scandals. And the only industry that allows you to have 0 scandals doing consensual shit is the sex industry.
Yeah.
So it's great. And so as I got a little bit more interested, I started designing products. I wanted to help people with erectile dysfunction, with lubrication issues, improve their sex lives. And then it was a long, circuitous path to data and intelligence.
So very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So you went through all these kind of experiences, and then this kind of shaped where you wanted to pick up, where you wanted to go essentially. So for example, if we take it back a little bit, so you got into this, but you said, so you went to Yale University, right? So what were your experiences like at Yale? What is that like to go to a prestigious university where you've had people George Bush Sr. or Dick Cheney, or people like Bill Clinton that's walked through the corridors? What is that like? Because I would say like for me, like I went to university in England and a couple other countries, but the universities that I went to weren't necessarily prestigious. They were just like more like, you know, like we'll give you a degree if you pay for it.
Yeah,
kind of university. Which is kind of like me being honest, got to represent the Honesty podcast, you know. And so what is that like to go to like a prestigious university and yeah, like essentially what is it like? What is the pressure that comes with it? Because I can imagine there's high pressure, right? They must really, is it really like they really push you constantly?
No. In fact, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess everyone's experience is a little bit different. I think for me, it was freedom, like more freedom than I've ever had in my whole life. Like high school, middle school, I was always an overachiever, big fish, small pond kind of thing, a little bit of a slacker, you know, so I'd work just hard enough to get an A and not a moment, like not more, and sometimes it wouldn't be an A, it'd be like a B plus, but like, you know, whatever. And then when I got to Yale, it was like finding family. And I just had conversations, and you could go to class, you could not go to class, like any other university, right?
So they had like a very like free-spirited culture then?
Yeah. I mean, you'd always be doing something, so it was like, you know, you can get free money to do anything. It's like, okay, I want to bring, like, you know, this famous actor to the school to talk about the role of like,
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, there's some gunshots in the background.
Don't scare them.
Mum, don't worry, it's a safe neighbourhood, it's just they're doing some filming outside, you know. They're actually doing it for some German TV show, so it's kind of strange. Like, the guy didn't even let me back into my house, you know. I had to wait for 5 minutes. So we were speaking about, like, before the
school experience.
Gunshot,
for the gunshots.
Yeah.
You know, but funnily enough, like New Haven is like not a safe space.
Yeah.
Like it's a super kind of sketchy area, but like Yale owns all of it, so you feel oddly safe when you shouldn't.
Yep.
So like people will get their bags stolen and shit, and it's like, come on, guys.
And what's like the feeling of actually being at an American university? Because like I would say from my like European perspective, when you see like the news, for example, and you see like these guys coming into schools with guns. Obviously, this is like the media's portrayal of it. Like, I don't imagine that it happens all the time. But is there an element of like fear in your mind when you go to like an American university? Because I know, for example, one of my friends, he did an internship at like Florida State, and they've got panic buttons everywhere. They have security guards with guns. And does that like affect your mentality, like when you go to university, or do you just does that become part of the experience?
Well, you forget I'm American, right? So it's not like a different experience for me to be kind of, you know, mindful of you could get shot. Like, it's not front of mind. It's kind of like, you know, walk with keys in your hand because someone might mug you. It's like, you know, I mean, for me, it's just an extension of that experience. So it's not so much of an outsider looking in, so much as an insider just continuing to be on the inside. I think for me, the biggest culture shock was moving from the south to the north. So I'm originally from Atlanta. We talk slow, we walk slow, we eat well. Like, you know, we're polite. We season our food with more than just like a half a pinch of salt. Like, it's like a real place.
Yeah.
And moving to New Haven, I think because I was still in the U.S., I thought it was going to be just the same. Like, I'm going from home 1 to home 2.
Yeah.
And it was not that. People were colder. The weather was colder. I got seasonal depression because like the sun would go out at like 4 o'clock, and you're just like, where did it go?
Yeah.
You know, it must be nighttime now. I still have the rest of the day.
Well, I guess that's the thing with the United States. It's such a vast country,
it's
right?
so huge.
And it's like each state is like the same size as England or larger. You know? So actually, it's kind of insane in that sense. So I guess if you go from like, you know, south to north or west to east or east to west, it's so different, right? Even if you like look at the rap music from New York City to, you know, California or whatever, it's completely different, right? The vibe is different, everything is different. So I guess that's the thing. Is the only common thing is the fact that everyone speaks English, right? So it's like almost
not even though, right?
Yeah, true. Actually, on the like Miguel, one of our colleagues, for example, he always talks about like Miami and how it's mainly Spanish speaking. So I guess like there's Spanish influences from like the south, right, in Mexico and stuff.
I mean, but all over, right? Like, that's one thing I love about the country. Like, that's it. You know, when I miss stuff, it's that. And we take it for granted, and obviously we have all this like controversy with the Trump guy. But one of the most beautiful things about our country is that there is such diversity even in the second language. So the second language is Spanish. But like you have my colleagues were from like I worked in New York for a bit.
Yep.
At like a marketing agency, and I sat next to the executive assistants, who were these lovely ladies. And one of the ladies was half Puerto Rican, half I want to say Ecuadorian, but I might be wrong. But let's just roll with it for the point of this conversation. And her husband was Salvadorian, and so her kids were like these amazing humans and whatever. She would always feed me, and she spoke one type of Spanish. Now, my roommate in college, I had two roommates in college who both spoke Spanish. One was Dominican, one was Mexican, and they had their own kind of, culture. And so it's always lovely to kind of see how diverse and how nuanced even that, people want to make everything just like a monolith, right? Like everything's all the fucking same, and it's not, right? There are so many nuances to the people, and we always want to distill them to being, okay, America is hamburgers and steak. It's like, I don't even like steak like that.
Yeah.
Like I do, but like I can't afford the steak that I like, so I don't buy it, but whatever. But there's just so much beauty and so much potential in the country that we're missing out on.
I guess a lot of people, they create their preconceptions from what they've been told, or a lot of people, for example, in Europe, they've maybe never even been to the United States, and their preconceptions are based on, news by friends that have been there, events, Like for example, you could go to the US, you could go down Fifth Avenue or something like that, and basically, you could be, one American guy could be extremely rude to you, crossing the road, I actually remember, when I did an internship for a small amount of time in New York, and I was walking down Fifth Avenue, and I do remember crossing the zebra crossing, and this guy, was shouting at another guy, saying, "Hey man, what the fuck are you doing, man?" Like that, going crazy,
Yeah.
So it's I guess these are funny things, but these are individuals, right? These people don't represent a whole country.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, people we spoke about before, it's very easy to pigeonhole an entire nation based on individuals' actions, right?
Yeah.
So it's like someone like Donald Trump. He's very easy to look at,
Yeah.
and because you've got this available information about one person, you can make an assumption that everyone is like that, when in reality it's not the case.
Yeah.
So I think we with the British, we probably make assumptions about people like the French or the Irish and stuff like that, and vice versa,
Yeah.
And it's culturally driven into us that we have certain mindsets that you need to break. These are chains that you're culturally born into, that you have to somehow, to some degree, you have to break free of those ideologies and kind of step back and say, look, I've been told this from a young age, but I need to unlearn these things in order to see people, to see the real people behind, these kind of stereotypes and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and basically, you kind of went into it partially, and you said about your diverse, you've had quite a diverse life experience already, obviously born and raised in the south of the United States of America. You went to Asia to work, and now to Europe. And one of the questions that I have for you is the fact that, what is that like? For example, now that you've had this vast experience, what is that like when you return home? Do you feel like your whole image of the United States has completely changed? And the people you originally associated yourself with, do you see differences in their behavior that you didn't necessarily see before based on your experiences?
That's a great question, actually. And the kind of evasive answer is that it changes each year.
Mm-hmm.
So I left home when I was 17, right, to go to Yale or whatever. And then from Yale I went to New York, and then from New York I went to Asia. So I've been away from the country for 7 years.
Yeah.
And so when I first used to go back, it was stifling. It was going back into going back into racism, going back into being hyper aware of all of my intersections, and just feeling stressed, realizing that, you asked me about the guns before. When I left and came back, I was paranoid. So I'll tell you a story. I flew into New York. I lived in New York for a year. I was never afraid in New York. It was fine. But after living in Shanghai for like 2 years, maybe a year, I fly into LaGuardia, which is like, you know, I could take the bus from my house. I live in Harlem, I just take the bus. It's like not a big deal. But I get into LaGuardia and I was like, oh my God, it's midnight. They could kill me. Oh my God. I sound like a middle-aged white lady. And I was just like completely panicked. Like these hoodlums. And I was like, Alex, calm down.
Yeah, you're from here, right? So like,
Yeah.
you went there, and that's funny actually, because like I would say I'm on the flip side of that. Like I'm the white boy that like I'm the opposite in the sense that I like when I did my internship, I was staying in an apartment on. I think it was like I can't remember. I think it's 135th Street.
Okay.
So it's like where Martin Luther King Boulevard. Is it Martin Luther King Boulevard? I can't. 129th Street or something.
Yeah.
So I lived like six blocks up, right? And I was literally the only white guy in the whole area. But like the guy I lived with, this dude called Jerome, he was a lovely guy, and he introduced me to like people on the corner. He was like saying shit like to me, like, you know, just make sure you're polite to everyone and just kind of pretend to be overly British and like so people don't like take you
for a
as
white guy.
like some crazy white guy, you
Yeah.
know? Because like, I don't know if you've ever seen there's a program called Power, which is based in New York City, and it's the two like drug lords. One the main character is this black guy called James St. Patrick, who likes the top dog, and his like kind of protege is this white guy called Tommy, who's like a savage, like he's like a pit bull character, you know. So I didn't want to be like portrayed as this kind of guy that he's a roaming white guy in this neighborhood, he's fucking dodgy, you know, like stay the fuck away from him.
Yeah, exactly.
So I made sure that people thought I was the polite young guy who never got into trouble, you know. So I guess it's kind of interesting, but like if you go back to your story and you were saying about what were you saying again?
Like it changes over time, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like that first little bit, I was terrified, and then I got home and I was just like, this sucks. I feel trapped. I don't have as much freedom. Blah blah blah. And then when I came back this last trip, I went home for like 2 months, and it was fantastic. I did not feel like an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did, in a way.
So why do you think that happened though? Like for example, what had changed from the first trip to the second trip? Do you think like you were just aware that the differences were there, and then you kind of accepted it?
Maybe because the first trip, I think I was jarred by the fact like I call it re-entry shock.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call it like what reverse culture shock, but I just call it re-entry shock because it's not really a reverse culture. But you go back in and you're just like panicked. You're like, you know, I don't fit in, and nobody. Like people say,
that's super interesting.
yeah, because they ask you, say, how was your trip? How is Japan? I live in China. Oh, do they have houses over there? They must live in the slums.
God damn it.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, how did you get from I live in a major metropolis to I live in a shanty?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and even if I did, like, why, you know, I don't know, it's something about kind of being hyper aware of the lack of geographical knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and the lack of desire to learn about other cultures that the U.S. is famous for really made me upset. It's like, not my family's not like that. Like, my immediate family's not like that, you know, and I love them, right? Like, I love being around them. I love being able to kind of spend time with them. And I think this last trip, obviously, I'm older, you know, when I left the country, I was like 21, 22. I came back and I'm like 29,
Yeah.
and I'm engaged to be married, and I'm like grown. I'm just like, you know, I'm just older, you know, and perhaps it's like, this is what it feels like in general to age, no matter what your story is. Like maybe if I had stayed at home, it'd be the exact same thing, just different, but like the same kind of like dissatisfaction and anger turn into like mellowing out as you kind of realize it's not that serious.
Yeah.
Like,
That's like, I tell you what, that point really grabbed me when you talk about the re-entry shock kind of syndrome, because like when I was living in Finland, I lived in Finland for 2 years, and then actually a year and a half, and then as part of my master's degree, and then for the last quarter, I went to France, to live in the south, into the south of France as part of the program, and when I came back to England, I remember I had got very used to French culture, like so when you introduce yourself, you like kiss people and stuff like that. And at first, I really didn't like it. I really fucking hated it, because I always remember when this girl came to kiss me, and I was like, what the fuck is she doing? You know, like, but it was strange. Like maybe it's my previous kind of anxiety issues like all of a sudden arose out of nowhere, you know, and I was like kind of in an uncomfortable position, but then that uncomfortable position evolved into something comfortable. And essentially what happened is I got used to this culture, and then when I went back to England and I went into pub culture again, like we're going out with the lads and stuff, having some beers and shit. When you walk into a pub, it's very strange actually. Like I was speaking to someone about this in one of my French friends, I think, and what happens is you walk into a pub, everyone looks at you, right?
Yeah.
Everyone, it's very subconscious. Like I imagine that most people don't even realise it who are English, who've never really lived up in other places, you know. But when you come back, you realise that you walk in and everyone's kind of like looking at you. They're not like, maybe it's like more animalistic kind of behaviour. It's just like you're just checking the person out.
Right.
And then you kind of turn around and then you look away, you know? And it's like, I remember I went through this spell of anxiety where like I would be questioning why people are looking at me, and then I'd feel very, very uncomfortable, and I would start like sweating or whatever, feel really horrible about certain things, right? So I can understand when you talk about this re-entry shock. It's very strange that happens, because it's almost like you forget these certain things, or you see something that you never saw before, because you have become so acclimatized to another environment that when you come back, you see the little things you didn't see. It's almost like you are the foreigner. You know, you're the foreigner in your original environment. Yeah. So that for me was a very, very strange but also interesting experience, because also the flip side of that is that you come back to your city and you see things that you never saw before, like the beauty of the landscape, or you know, certain things about, like I would say, for example, when I was younger, for some reason I've always appreciated my parents and stuff, but I think I never really showed them my appreciation. I was almost like embarrassed to show them that I cared, because it's almost like a sign of weakness if I say to my mum, "Hey mum, I love you." Even today, it's something that I find a little bit difficult. I don't know what it is. It's maybe some kind of English cultural thing where like expressing your emotions is something that I've always found pretty difficult, unless I really care, you know. And I think as I have gone to other places, and probably the same for you, like you see these little flaws in yourself that you can patch up through different cultural experiences, you know. And do you have like some kind of similar experience to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Like, you know, any experience in a different culture, whether it be a local different culture or a foreign different culture, makes you more aware of your current circumstance. I mean, I think we talked about this before, but like, you know, when I was in high school, I was a bit of an ass, you know, like I was very smart, very lazy, you know, had a core group of friends who I still love to this day. But they had an impression of me that I was starting to grow out of. And for me, that mostly changed. Well, it started to change when I went to school, right? So for those of you who don't know, like, going from Georgia to Connecticut, it's like if I drove it would take about 14, 15 hours.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's up there, right? It's colder, everything's different, but also being in a highly intellectual space and being able to be free and to be both smart and stupid and foolish and experimenting in safety, because like U.S. universities are some of them are super enclosed, so they're very safe. Like you can do lots of crazy stuff in the confines of the university. So you're able to grow and try stuff and experiment and have these conversations. And you change and you don't even realize it. And you come home and they're thinking that you're still this person, you know, who is a little bit quiet, a little bit this, a little bit that. And like, I'm no longer tolerating the same things I used to tolerate, you know, and I'm like trying to grow up. I'm trying to have better conversations. And they feel like you're leaving them behind because they all stayed at home and you left, you know? So then I'm like, okay. And then I just moved farther. I moved farther away. And when I came back from Asia, like, I think they had become more comfortable with the fact that I had been gone so long. So I was like a stranger.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, who are you? And it's like, some things were fine. Like, I love, you know, the food culture and the speed, but like having to drive everywhere really aggravated me. Having to talk a certain way, having my friends think that I was still, you know, a 17-year-old adolescent bisexual woman, you know, stuck in the past when I'm now like fully adult, or at least trying to be.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
But do you think it's like people? I think it's like if we try and think from their perspective, it's like they base their kind of knowledge of who you are on the kind of last person they saw, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, for example, like when I went to secondary school, I was like the opposite to what you probably were. Like at secondary school or high school, it's the same thing. And I would say that I was pretty standard kind of like young lad. Like I didn't really study hard. Like I never really wanted to go to university. I never had the intention actually. I wanted to get an apprenticeship and like build boats and stuff like this.
That's
Like
awesome.
really, my whole concept was different because I was influenced by my environment. You know, so a lot of my friends went on to work in engineering companies or work in the dockyard for like in like nuclear power and things like this. So it's all their jobs which they do are really cool and stuff, but it's just not exactly what I wanted to do. It's not what I wanted to do now. But in that period of time, I wanted to follow this like status quo and do that kind of thing. And I would say that a lot of my friends, like for example, when I went to university, I started to change. You know, I started to change because I started to feel differently about myself. Previously, I thought I'm a fucking idiot. Like I just fuck around. Like I remember, for example, even in college, we were designing websites one time, and me and my friends, we must have been like 17 or 16, and I was like, we were like trying to make our teacher cry. You know, like it was like not a good thing. You know, like, I wasn't really in a good. I wouldn't say I was in a bad environment, but we would like. Annoy the teacher, so it wasn't like we were trying to make her cry, but we would annoy her for our benefit to make like other people laugh, and then that in itself like made you like you felt like you were cool, you know. So like it wasn't like I was hanging around with the wrong people. All my friends were good and stuff, but it's just we were all being fucking stupid, and I felt then that I remember what happened with me was I didn't get this job that I wanted. I remember, for example, there's a company in England called Princess Yachts, so they make custom design yachts for large companies, also for like football players and shit like this, right? And I always wanted to work there because I thought it would be really cool. So I remember me and my friends, we all applied because we all wanted to work together and stuff. You all wanted to stay close together. And I remember this feeling. I still really remember it, and I applied for this job. I went through the process, passed all the stuff, got to the final 10 or 15 in the interview process. And I had made a thing called an oscillating air engine when I was 16, so because I did engineering and stuff, so I had to create like a simplified version of an engine with the flywheel oscillating, the oscillating flywheel, the valve, the pistons, everything. I made everything from scratch, just from a piece of couple pieces of metal. I made everything, and we had a brilliant teacher and stuff. So we were quite ahead of our time in engineering in that regard. And I remember coming to the interview, and I said to, I went into the interview very confident. I was about 16, and I just remember the job was for boat building, so it was mainly woodwork related stuff. And I wanted to show the man and the lady who were interviewing me, I wanted to show them my potential. So I brought them in my engine, and I said, look, I know this doesn't represent like woodwork or like yacht building, but I wanted to bring it in to show you the potential that I have. And look, if I can build this, then I can definitely help build yachts. You know, this was kind of like my leverage point. And I genuinely thought, I've smashed it. I've got this fucking job. I didn't even kind of question it in my mind. I was like, I've got it. I know I've got it. Like, it was written in the stars for me. And I didn't get it. And I was fucking gutted. I remember going to my grandparents' house and being like, holy fuck, what the hell am I going to do now? I either wait 1 year and apply again and maybe not get in, or do something else. And I applied for university on a whim, right? Knowing that I didn't really want to do it, but I thought, fuck it, I'll try something, right? And I only did it because I had a conversation with my cousin. Literally had a conversation with my cousin, and then about 3 days later I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. I've got enough credits to get in. And I got in, and ever since that moment of impulse, that impulsive decision, which sometimes, like when you think in hindsight, most impulsive decisions are stupid, not always, but in this impulsive decision was like the catalyst of everything I've ever done from now on. So I look back and I think, wow, this is absolutely like insane that this small decision evolved into me living in several different environments.
But that's
learning
how
from
it
different
is,
people.
though. That's the truth, though. Like, I think like people want you to believe that impulse
Yeah.
is like stupidity.
Yes.
But in many ways, it's a kind of aggregation of all of your secret desires and all your
It's
secret
like your inner
experiences.
child. I think it's like
Yeah.
I'm reading this book at the minute by Paulo Coelho, and it's called the Warrior of Light, right?
Okay.
And at the start of the book, it talks about you have to listen to your inner child, right? And sometimes this impulsive decision, you just have this feeling within you that it's the right thing to do, whether it's the right thing to say at the moment, the right way to act,
Yeah.
whether it's a football player and he scores a free kick that he has absolutely no right, you know, like Lionel Messi last week when he scored some crazy ass free kick, you know? This guy didn't have any right to do that, but why did he do that? Because you got the feeling to kick the ball at the right time. And I think that's the thing in life, like certain times you have to kick the ball when you feel it's necessary.
But the thing is, like, when is it necessary, right? Like, you can, you know, sometimes you shouldn't follow your gut. Sometimes you should follow your mind and,
True.
like, you know, work a job, learn something, earn some money, you know, not be like, you know, because, like, we live in a certain amount of privilege, right? Like, where we could follow our gut because we have a little bit of a safety net to do so.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but like, your story made me think of like when I moved to China, right? So I felt this pressure from myself, right? Like, you don't get into Yale by being an underachiever, unless you're Bush Jr. But you know, especially if you're like, you know, minority from middle class, like, you're busting your balls. Like, you're not like, you know, people think that, oh, affirmative action means you just walked in. You know, you were destined.
What is that though? You know affirmative action, right? The only reason I've heard of affirmative action is because Nas has a song called Affirmative Action that I really like, but I don't think that has anything to do with like I don't actually know what even it means.
Oh,
what does it mean?
I'm probably the wrong one to explain this, but basically it's like, we screwed you over and like didn't let you do anything for decades, centuries. So now we're going to try to have a quota system to kind of fix the problem.
Okay. So basically, like, so for example, they let in say just hypothetically or whatever. So like, they'll say like 70% is like usually white people, or whatever, and then they'll allocate a certain amount to
maybe
minority.
I'm not as well versed on the.
But I said minority then, but I don't like saying that. I think it's fucking retarded saying that.
I mean, that's how you identify. I don't know. Right? Because like, we are technically the minorities of the country.
Yeah, it's true, but like at the same time, I just don't like the
connotation
expression, because it's like it's devaluing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like they have a minority stake in the country.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. There's certain things like that are kind of like a little bit interesting. You know, like I don't know why certain people use it.
Yeah, I get that actually.
You know,
I had never thought about it. I think like it is kind of problematic. It kind of makes like you feel like you just don't count as much.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never thought about it, but I think it's uncomfortable when you put it that way. But anyway,
Canadian spirit.
Oh gosh. But yeah, you know, I worked really hard. I got into school, and I wanted to be a lawyer. Everyone knew I was going to be a lawyer. I did mock trial. That's why I laughed. When we were talking about law, so earlier today we were talking about law stuff, and so I was like, I actually have a good grasp on legal jargon, at least. I used to fucking kill cases when I was in high school.
Really?
Like, yeah, I would just crush them because I love it. I really enjoy it, but it's a hobby. It's a hobby. Like, it's not my career. It's a hobby.
Wow.
But I wanted to be like an international lawyer, and then go into like diplomacy. I still kind of want to do that. And travel with a big fat passport and just be like, I can get in anywhere, you know. And so when I got to Yale, I was like crushed. Like I was no longer, it wasn't as easy, and I hadn't learned the habits I needed to learn to be successful at that level because I could do it so easily. I was just like, I don't have to try, and so now I have to try, and I'm not succeeding.
Yeah.
You know, and then slowly over the years, I was able to kind of find my footing and be able to accomplish something, but it's like not good enough to get into like anything for real. Like, I'm not getting a job at like, you know, any of these boxes you're supposed to check. My dad wanted me to work for McKinsey. I'm like, fuck McKinsey. I don't want to work for consulting.
How does this kind of thing work in like the US, for example? Because like in the United Kingdom, we have like the graduate schemes, you know, like
When you say United Kingdom,
yeah.
it just sounds like Lion King.
The Lion King, yeah, it kind of does actually. But like it's in like the UK, for example, we have like these things called graduate schemes, right, in the Lion King, and and basically like you finish your bachelor's degree or whatever, and then you go straight into like a grad scheme. So usually you get paid quite well, and then you go for a 2-year process usually, and then you become some kind of manager.
You say cog?
Some kind. I was trying to say kind, but I said cog.
You become a cog in the machine.
Cog in the machine. No, but actually no. I was trying to say kind of, but it kind of came out like a mess. But but like yeah, that's how it works in the UK. But like, is there a similar system? Like,
Depends on the school.
so it's dependent on the school. It's not like basically in England, like, I would say like the companies, say like JP Morgan, IBM, all these guys. Every year they create this one program which maybe they have 100 applicants
Maybe,
or something,
yes,
and the
no.
top guys or women get into the job.
Yeah.
And then they do it every year. So it's basically like a rotational system. So the guys that retire leave, the new guys come in. The guys that retire leave,
Yeah,
new
it's
guys
not
come
that
in.
cut and dry for us.
Really?
I mean, for some people, the process is you do some summer internship every summer before your senior year, and then if you're working in iBaking or something like that, like you get get your job earlier on, and or some people do go rotational programs, and like marketing, something like that. But mostly you just kind of like go to your career service center, say here's what I'm kind of interested in, and you just hit the pavement. You start networking. Luckily at the Ivies it's pretty easy in some respects, like if you're in certain fields, because they come to visit. So they all come to campus, and you go to like campus fairs, excuse me, and people kind of come to recruit you at set.
Yeah.
But that requires you to know what you want to do. Meanwhile, I was a Chinese major and had no clue what I wanted to do. I like left the politician diplomat thing behind, stumbled into being a Chinese major, ended up like, where am I gonna go? Failed my linguistics class because I thought I was gonna be a linguist after this, because I love linguistics. I love the science of it, And I was like, I don't know. So I'm just like cranking out applications. 150 applications later, I got a job, one job in Korea, one job in Japan, and one job at a prestigious marketing agency in New York that didn't want to pay me shit. And so I went to the marketing agency in New York, right? And I was miserable. I was happy for all of like 3 months, and it was great. Like I was working on big campaigns like Nestle, Dove, Castor Motor Oils, like really getting my teeth in, sinking my teeth in. But they had just laid off a bunch of middle managers. So it was me, the peon, and then like senior dude who like is a multinational like senior person, and he's having to manage me when he ain't got no time to manage me. So then I'm like, well, how do I learn? So I'm like harassing people for work. Like I'm through the office like, hey, can you tell me anything?
So you had nothing to do, essentially.
Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. I mean, I think I made a mistake once where I took too long on a project trying to learn, all right? But the thing they don't tell you is you can't try to learn when your hours are billable.
Yeah.
Because now you're costing the company money trying to learn. So then I have to like finagle the system so that I don't overcharge a very prestigious water brand out of France out of a couple $1 million. So then they just like, I stopped getting work. Like all of a sudden it just dried up. So I was like, what am I gonna do? And this is actually how I got really into analytics. That's how I ended up eventually in intelligence. Because I would go to the analytics section, and there was this lady named Madonna who was the most
fancy name.
She's outrageous. She was so great. And I think I messaged her the other day on LinkedIn, and she remembered me, but it's like, it was a long time ago. But she would just mentor me. I would just sit down, and she would teach me how to like read the over-indexing and the under-indexing on like this software called MRI that like basically was psychographics of the whole, like whatever you wanted to know. You could just find it and read it. So she taught me that. And after I learned that, folks came asking me for work. They were like, can you give me XYZ analysis, blah, blah. So then I had plenty of work.
Yeah.
But by that time, coming full circle to the impulse, I said, fuck this job. I am miserable.
So then you left the job
Then
in
I
New York,
quit.
and where did you go?
To China
Okay.
without a job.
So you literally just thought,
I
fuck
said,
it, I'm gonna
I
go.
gave my notice. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to move, and I got. Luckily, the reason you go to Yale is for the network.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And also that level of prestigious university is a safety net to some degree, right? Because everyone's always gonna be like, oh, you went to Yale.
I mean, it has stopped carrying me now.
It has weight.
It used to carry me.
It has weight for sure, right? It's like you got
Not
that Mike
anymore.
Tyson glove
Not
right
anymore.
over here ready.
It used to be like that because.
Yeah. But you didn't have the experience back then, right? So it's like
Right,
the
so
experience that you have
exactly.
now is the
But
right.
it's not carrying right now. Now now fuck myself. So I quit my job, moved to China, worked in education consulting because a friend of a friend's sister gave me a job
Okay, so
in Shanghai.
True
Like it was
network.
just like do got a
Yeah.
job. Miserable, toxic culture, startup, exploitative, yada yada, etc.
Well, what was it in? What was it in?
In education consulting. So I was helping kids get into college. They paid you like a lot of money to just do that. So I did
When
that.
you say like it's in the negative culture, like can you elaborate a bit more like on
Yeah.
the experience of that?
Fuck, it was miserable. So the CEO's brother was the head of HR.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So anytime you had a problem, you couldn't tell HR
Because they're
because
emotionally connected.
HR would rat you out to.
Ah,
CEO.
Okay.
Now they also had this woman named somebody. I won't mention her name. I caught myself naming somebody. And she would divide and conquer us because we were young and we were eager and we wanted to make a difference. And she would separate us all out and tell us each what we wanted to hear, even if it was conflicting information. You will be the next COO of this company. What do you need? Do you need anything? I'm like, no. You need to be more proactive.
What? So she used to say this shit to everyone.
Everybody separately. And had we
Sounds
stayed
like some
divided,
Game of Thrones
it
shit
was
going
some
on.
bull junk. Like, and so, but one day, and this is what I like about myself, it's my one trait I actually love,
Yeah.
is that I find that I tend to be the glue in groups, where I bring people together when they would much rather stay separate. So one day I was like, yo, we're gonna all go get nachos. We're just gonna go. So all of us went to get nachos, and we started talking. And we realized,
Okay.
wait a second, she told me the same thing when I got hired. Well, she told me the same thing. And we were all sold the same or some similar dream that it just physically could not work. You can't all be the COO. And then none of them got it. And it went to somebody else. I was dead. Anyway, so it was like this kind of environment where people cried daily. We all quit within 3 days of each other. And it was a fluke. It was not planned.
Really?
It was a fluke. We all quit, and we're all doing fine. Like one girl went to med school, and now it's like living in Hawaii and like practicing medicine.
But that's
you
the
know,
thing,
like-
right? Like everyone says on the surface, we're fine. But the thing is, you don't know how someone is. You know, you don't
You don't
understand
ask.
their mindset. Yeah, exactly. You don't ask, you will never find out. And even to some degree, even when you do ask, people are
Lie.
they lie and they hide their real intentions because a lot of the people who you ask in these environments, they're nice people.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't want to hurt your feelings, even if you've hurt their feelings. You know,
Right,
because they
exactly.
have a high level of empathy or something like this. So I think it's definitely difficult. You know, definitely a difficult situation.
Oh, it was miserable. It was miserable. You know, but whatever. It opened up a gateway for me to get high level Chinese. I earned a lot of money, so I got to see I got to define my preferences.
Mhm.
You know, I got to travel a lot. You know, I got to live in Shanghai for 3 years.
That must be unbelievable. Like because for me, I've lived only really in Europe. Well, actually, only in Europe really. And so I'm very aware of the European style. Like from country to country, it's very similar. You know, like when I lived in Finland, it was a little bit different culturally. These guys lived in the cold, you know, so they wear double jackets and don't talk. You know, 'cause
That's
they ain't
real.
got energy to talk.
Yeah,
They
for
think,
sure.
Fuck you, I ain't got time for you.
Yeah, for sure.
But like for you, it's just like this diversity element is so cool, right? Because I think most people, the average person, like for example, like if I think about someone like my mum and dad, you know, I don't think they've really been to that many countries, you know. Whereas
Yeah,
like
mine
you've
either.
lived in multiple countries in different areas of the world and the different environments and different situations.
Yeah.
It's very interesting just as like to hear like these kind of stories, you know.
And it wouldn't have happened if I just didn't on an impulse say,
Yeah.
screw it. And then when I said screw it again, I came back, you know, went to China and I met my wife.
Yeah.
And then we said screw it. And
So you met your wife in China?
Yeah.
Wow. So how did that evolve then? Like how did
Nothing sophisticated. We were
No.
in a bar. It
Yeah.
was gay night and like whatever, you know. I had given up on China actually. Got pissed off at the culture of like, you know, my bosses happened to be bad. It wasn't like a Chinese thing. It was like I had bad bosses, and so I quit. Went and traveled a bit. Went back to the U.S. Said, "The fuck am I doing here?" Fled back to China, and within 2 weeks I met my wife.
Wow.
Yeah, we were in a bar. I walked in. She was sitting next to one of my friends. We hit it off. She stood me up.
Oh,
Yes,
shit.
she
So
stood
how
me
did you
up.
feel about that originally?
Salty. I was pissed. But I had already got her phone number. I texted her the next day. I was like, "What the fuck?" And she was like, "I'm so sorry." And then we went out on a date where we just like walked throughout what's called the Bund area of Shanghai. So it's like basically on the river.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like gorgeous, like old style French buildings. We just talked for hours. I was like, oh my god, I'm so in love. Like, I'm so in love. This is day 2. It's okay. You know, like, oh, fuck, I'm so in love. And then we saw each other every day for 6 months.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then by that time, it's like, okay, I'm going to be with you. And then you said, we're done with China. We've both been here 3 years independently. And we went backpacking. And then we ended up in business school in Malaysia.
So rewind to backpacking. So how did you even come up with this idea of backpacking?
It was her idea.
And where did you go?
It was
And
her
where
idea.
did you start?
And where did you start?
end?
Yeah.
And where did everything?
So my wife's plan, her name is Kelly. So Kelly's plan was that when she left China, she was gonna make her way back to Canada. She's Canadian. She's gonna make her way back to Canada slowly.
Not backpack all the way back.
Yeah. With the
10 years.
eventually.
10 years.
Yeah. No. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna take like a paddle boat and shit.
Yeah.
You know. But so it was her plan, and I jumped onto her plan. And so we started in Nepal. 2.5 weeks in Nepal, 4 months in India,
Oh shit.
2.5 weeks in Sri Lanka, then Indonesia,
Yeah.
Malaysia, Thailand, Myanmar, back into Thailand, over to Laos, over to Vietnam, and then by that time I had gotten into this university in Malaysia because I had a friend who used to live in China who's now living in Malaysia. We had another friend who got me in school, whatever. So I ended up in business school. So then I'm like, fuck, I need money to go back to school. So I left Kelly on the trip. So Kelly went on to Vietnam and then met me in Malaysia. I went to China to work for 2 months because I got a side hustle. So I worked for 2 months and then we met in Malaysia. And so then we stayed in Malaysia for 2 years. So it was like,
Wow, that's the thing is, it's like, for example, you went through all of these countries, right? And during this time of backpacking and stuff, so I assume that you were like walking around. Were you hitchhiking and things like this?
no, we didn't hitchhike. We bused mostly.
Okay, so you did you have like a preordained route that you followed, or were you kind of spontaneous?
We had a country route, not a city route. We would kind of plan it on the fly a little bit. Kelly's more of a planner. I'm more of a like, let's just see.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it balances out. So we end up having enough money to do things. Count your blessings. But yeah, no, we just kind of had a mixture of both. And if something came up or we had like a squirrel moment, we would just go with it. So we ended up at lots of just like random places, doing random things. Sometimes slightly dangerous, sometimes less so.
Mhm.
And then sometimes it's just like, okay, I don't want to move anymore. Can we just stay here for a month?
And like,
so
what's
we
your
did.
most memorable moment of the trip? Like, do you remember like something happening that instantly you thought, wow, this is unbelievable?
Oh, there were several times.
Yeah.
Like you don't go to that many different countries and I have that, but one that comes to mind. There are 2 that come to mind. The first one is I almost drowned in Indonesia. We were doing a 3-island kind of snorkeling trip, and while I'm a strong swimmer in a swimming pool, something about the open water scares the living shit out of me. And we had the snorkel. My snorkel didn't work, so the water was coming through the pipe, and I was paranoid. Panicking. And like the logical thing to do is to take the fucking mask off because you can swim. But like because I'm having it on my face, I'm like, gotta breathe through this. So I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
And Kelly, we were fighting a little bit because when you travel with somebody for that long, living in the way we live, and you ready to just.
Yeah, got people out and shit, gonna RKO fools.
You're just like, God, she looked at me like, I'll kill you, and I was like, I'll kill you, but I still love you. And you're just like, I hate you, but I love you. It's a mess.
Close proximity.
Fuck, you're like in our box. Anywho, so I got back on the boat, and I was like, I ain't doing this shit. And Kelly looked at me like, bitch, get back in this water. What you're not gonna do is, we already paid for this. Get back in the water. And then I get back in the water, and she holds my hand. She says, like, you okay? You're fine. And we just started swimming, and we're gone. We saw 2 sea turtles that were like bigger than this room, and like all the fish from like Finding Nemo, and like it was
that sounds really sick.
Incredible. And then the second thing that comes to mind was we did a 5-day motorbike tour through Laos.
On the
scooters.
Were they terrible? Were they like really bad and stuff like that?
No, they were wonderful.
Really?
Yeah. We just got the lady gave us a map. Said, here's the map.
Yeah.
Bye. And you look at the map, you said, okay, I can read, and you just go. And you pick whatever route you want, and they have like suggested houses, inns that you can stay in.
That must be so cool, right?
Oh my God.
And I bet it's so different to what we're used to.
It is stunning. And it's super touristy, like it's super well trod, but it's like, it doesn't feel like it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope it never feels like it, because it's amazing. Like, it was amazing. I mean, one time we were just driving in the rain, and we're like coming up the side of mountains, and like we almost got hit by like a semi truck because the roads are like that big, and you're like, I don't. But then after we got through that, like I drove the whole time, and it's like 500 kilometers, and like then we got through this hill, and there was like the most depressing looking area, but it was so spiritual. Like the trees have been slashed and burned, so there are all these black light pegs standing out of the kind of orange flesh.
Yeah.
And you look out, and you're just like, this is so macabre. Like that kind of deep, horrible kind of like beauty, and it's gorgeous. And you're just like, this is gorgeous.
So all these trees were basically destroyed.
It's destruction,
and
but it's
was it just for miles and
for
miles?
a while, yeah. And it's just gorgeous. You know, but then other days you would see just like bounty, you know, and so kind of seeing that kind of like diverse landscapes and just, you know, one day we ended up in what's called the Blue Lagoon, and it's 360-degree mountains in a valley. You're in a valley, you look up and you're like, what? You know, and it's so romantic. Oh my God, like you can't even imagine how romantic it is. It's just you, your bike, and your wife, your future wife. Like, I kind of know it's gonna marry her at that point, because like this is like 3 years in now, I guess, 2-3 years in. But like, it was, like you've never seen anything like it. So
I've never done backpacking to some degree, but me and my friend, for example, we cycled through Europe on our bikes actually.
Yeah.
And so I understand the close proximity, even though we only did it for like, I think it was 3.5 weeks.
Yeah.
So we cycled from like the Netherlands through, it was from the Netherlands into Belgium, into Germany, back into France, through Switzerland, through Luxembourg. And then, slightly slightly Luxembourg, slightly more north than Switzerland, but then back into France, and then I cycled to Lyon.
Whoa.
And then I took a flight home, and I sold my bike in France and flew home.
That's cool.
And then worked in the summer for a little bit, and then came to Germany. But I definitely understand the experience of very close proximity, because I think it was very strange, because like I think you have to be very close with the person. Like, I did my second trip with one of my really good mates, Sonny, and me and him we basically, it was kind of funny, the story of how I met him. Essentially, like when I first moved to Finland, I think it was in like the second semester of my first year there. Actually, no, it was the end of the first semester. I literally held the door open, just like held the door open for this one guy in my apartment, and he just said, "Oh, cheers, mate." And I was like, I looked, and I was like, "Cheers, mate." I was thinking, I'm pretty sure I've heard that before somewhere, you know. And then he invited me. He actually, he invited me for scones and tea, which is literally the most
gosh.
British thing of all time.
Right.
He did that, and then we ended up becoming like really good mates and stuff. And we decided to do a cycling trip. And I think you have, when you're in such a high level of close proximity, where every day you're farting in each other's face and like you're like scrubbing next to each other and all of this kind of shit. You know, you have to, first of all, you have to have a reasonably good level of banter between each other, and also you have to be tolerant.
Yeah.
Because actually, I think what I find is like when I'm with certain people, because he's a bit older than me, he's about 32, or he was 32 in that period, and I always think that like it's very strange when I'm around certain people that are a bit older than me, or like it's very obvious that they've gone through experiences that I haven't. I kind of sit back a little and like let them take charge naturally, because I just want to observe, how they do things. And also I think partially like I can become lazy around people like that, so sometimes I don't always try to hang around with those people, because I'm prone to like saying, oh, okay, they've got the experience, I'll just let them do it.
Yeah, you don't learn anything.
Yeah, you don't actually learn anything unless you were deliberately trying to learn stuff like that. So from him, I learned a lot prior to this trip about learning how to speak with people and stuff like this, and he's a very good conversationalist, and so I learned a lot from just observing him, the way he would talk, his body language and stuff like this, and I'd kind of like imagine that I would be him when I would talk to a girl that I would once get embarrassed about and have a high level of anxiety, right? So I guess like going back to the point with the cycling trip in close proximity, you have to be really like, have to have that perfect relationship, right? And you have to almost know each other so well, or not necessarily me and him, but like with you guys, I guess, like you have to know each other, understand each other, care about each other kind of thing, and then it works, right? Because even when you argue, you know it's not really personal.
I don't know.
Oh yeah?
I mean,
Oh
I think,
shit.
I think
Fireworks.
I think you have to know them enough, but like just a little bit more mystery. I don't know. Like I think it's better to travel with people you're not sleeping with.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I definitely wasn't sleeping with my mates.
Yeah, so it's like it's easy.
Yeah.
It's like when you know, I can be abrasive, right? And so I've learned not to do this anymore, but at the time I was still like the kind of person who, when we get into a fight, I'll cut your face. You know what I mean? Like, no, figuratively, like, you know. And
of course,
so it was like,
I mean, we're about to switch.
Yeah, come on.
Peaky Blinders style.
Shut up. But like, you know, you hurt people, and they don't get over it because you've hurt them, and then you have 11 more months.
Yes.
And you know,
deal with that.
but you grow so much, and so it's like you get to have this bond with someone who you've seen them at their absolute worst. You've seen them, you know, super angry and mean. You've seen them with food poisoning, you know, and all the things that brings. And you're living in a shanty that costs about like $5 for the whole thing, and you're just like, okay, all right, here we go. You know, like it's intimate, you know, and it's not pleasant. Not all the time, but then those moments that you have the highest highs and the lowest lows that you'll ever experience.
But I guess like if you encapsulate that experience, it's almost like a metaphor of life, right? In the sense that like if you're with someone for their entire life, you're always going to have those experiences where they're not going to be nice on a certain day or something like this. So it's almost like that whole experience is encapsulated into a small period of time, and if you're able to get through that, then you're able to like kind of get through everything.
Yeah, spot on. And like with my now wife, you know, that means we don't actually have problems anymore. Yeah, that's what people don't tell you. It's like we don't have issues
because you went through everything, right? You went through the beacon of hell and came out.
Oh, that's okay. Like nothing can faze me.
Yeah.
Like I had all of our life in like 12 months, just condensed version, so we're good.
But what phases you? What phases you today?
With whom?
With whatever in life.
Whatever.
What is like? What are you? For example, what is a struggle or a barrier that you like feel like you would like to overcome?
So while earlier I said that, like, you know, I'm no longer, I don't know if I said this, but I think I thought it, like, that I'm no longer necessarily following other people's pressures from me. So I mentioned that, like, you know, I wanted to be a diplomat and I was working hard, but I kept failing. And then, you know, I felt like to some extent, while I'm having all these adventures, I'm kind of getting off course. And in my mind, I know that's not true because I think my experiences make me a very interesting human. But my friends used to work for the Obamas. You know, one of my friends is, you know, creating the Green New Deal for the U.S. Like, it's on the news all the time. A lot of my friends are teachers who are making impact in people's lives, and it's like, I am trying to start a sex tech intelligence company, and it's not working so well, you know, and so, you know, I'm just stressed all the time, but also happy. Like, I've learned that I have the capacity to hold 4 or 5 emotions at the same time, and that's okay. Like, at any given time, I'm anxious, joyous, angry, dissatisfied, and just like ecstatic. And sometimes if I'm sitting long enough, people will see all 5 kind of just cross my face, and they're like, "You just spaz out?" Like, maybe, you know, like, I don't know what's happening, but I feel this pressure to succeed. I will always be an overachiever. You know, I do not like wasting my fucking time. I need to get stuff done because I don't have that much time. You know, like, but now I think I have the same mentality, but for the right reasons. If you had asked me this 4 or 5 years ago, I would say I don't have time because my goal is to be top 30 under 30, and I'm 29, and I'll be 30 in August, so it's like, I ain't gonna make it. But now I think the reason is because I want to accomplish something, and I want to change the world. And I personally believe that by reframing how we view sex, how we interact with our own bodies, interact with other people's bodies, and learn consent, learn respect, learn all the things we learn how to drive a car. We don't learn just go speed down the road. No, you learn how to fucking stop, to yield, to all these things that are very vital to the survival of everyone, you know, and to map those onto sexuality. I think that these things will change how we view society. It will to some extent remove, you know, these gender gaps and all the other bullshit that we deal with, right? But like, navigating that takes time. It takes reframing. It takes patience. And now it feels like people are catching up, but from a sex toy perspective. So people want to make the products, you know, liberate women, liberate everybody, but there's no regulation. There's no oversight. There's no consciousness about what it takes to please someone, the ergonomics of it. It's not just like make a dick-shaped thing and be like, yo, you'll be fine. Because lots of men make the sex toy products for women and think, oh yeah, that's how it works, right? That's why you can't make them come anyway, right? Like, you're reinforcing this problem. But that's what I mean, like, you're reinforcing the fucking issue. Like, you're the problem. But you might not, you know, I don't know, it's just it's so deep. And for me, like...
No pun intended. Yeah. I had to be a bit childish.
Thank you, I appreciate that. but yeah, you know, I don't know, I'm stressed. I'm always stressed.
But are you happy that you're stressed? Are you happy that you chose this path?
Yes.
So that's important, right? Because actually, like everyone is always to some degree responsible for certain actions that they take, whatever. Like your choice to be an entrepreneur, but then, like for example, the choice for you to become what you're becoming is something that gives you these stresses, but also gives you the passion. You know, and do you think these things come hand in hand? Like
maybe. I mean, I think what gives me the stress now is having this passion, having this idea, seeing it clearly, and having to depend on someone else for financial support, right? Like, I can't just wake up every day. I mean, I did do that for 6 months, maybe almost a year, while I was applying for jobs.
Yeah.
I just worked on my startup. We lived in Vietnam. We lived cheap. I worked my ass off. I couldn't make it monetize in that time period, so now I'm gonna earn some money.
Yeah.
So now the anger, I think, comes from having to sacrifice my valuable fucking time to earn money for someone else, while they're not paying me shit. So it's like, okay, I could be doing everything that I'm not doing for you, for myself, and I would respect myself for it.
Yeah.
Right? It causes anxiety, it causes anger, it causes this feeling of just like wasting time.
But I wonder, this is very interesting, right? Because I feel that a lot of people who go through an entrepreneurial experience who I know, who I have spoken to, they share like a similar, mindset when it comes to these things. They're, stressed about what they're doing, but they're also very happy about the fact that they've taken the leap of faith to do their own thing.
And that's full circle though. You know what, this comes full circle to what you said earlier about how people don't tell you anything. They say, I'm fine.
Mhm.
Because they think that they're supposed to be fine. But have you looked on LinkedIn recently and all the articles that are coming out about the secret mental health crisis in entrepreneurs?
Okay, no, I haven't really
People
read into that.
read up on it because it's not easy. Like when you hear about the tragic writers. Like writers are the original entrepreneurs, right? They're trying to make money from some stuff that is super subjective.
True.
Right? People, you're putting your entire faith in something that does not fucking exist. You're actually crazy. You are actually crazy. Okay? Let's call it what it is. You are fucking crazy. And so people are looking at you like, you're fucking crazy. I'm not giving you my money. And the only way you can give you money is if you're doing the same shit that already made them a bunch of money last year. So if you're doing anything that's truly original,
You go into the status quo, right?
you're in open space. You're by yourself.
Yeah, it's true. Like I remember, for example, like if we're talking about artists in the sense that, like, writer is an artist that creates something. And I remember, for example, reading about like Queen and Freddie Mercury, and when they created the song Bohemian Rhapsody, it's like 7 minutes, right? And for example, when Bohemian Rhapsody was first created, they tried to release it onto the radio, and the radio stations were like, "What the fuck? We're not going to play this 7-minute dog shit. Like, this is ridiculous, right?" Obviously, a bit of paraphrasing going on here.
Yeah.
And anyway, but essentially they refused, right? And then eventually they were like, "No, come on, fucking play it." And when they played it, it was a hit because everyone was like, "I've never heard anything like this before. This is insane." And I guess that's the beauty of originality. It's like sometimes it needs that little bit of resistance, because it's like pushing like a square through a circle. It doesn't really fit the system, but you make the system fit into it, and then it's like the opposite, right? So it's like, with your like trials and tribulations that you have today in regards to becoming an entrepreneur and creating your business. When you are successful, you'll look back at these moments and you're like, I enjoyed the journey, the struggle. It's like there's a song by like J. Cole that I really like. It's called Love Yours, and he always talks about this. He says, there's beauty in the struggle and ugliness in the success.
That's true.
And obviously I'm not in a position to start talking about, hey, I'm super successful or anything like this. No, by no means at all. But I like to listen to these kind of people because I like try and understand the perspective of like they've gone through the pain. And they have this level of understanding that we're not able to understand yet, So it's like if you listen to those people who are very successful and they say enjoy these moments because these will be the moments that you really favour when you are successful,
But
So
the fear is that you weren't one of the 3 or 4 that rise to the cream, right? The fear is you're fighting so much, right? And I think it is possible. I think that if you actually have a good idea, and you're actually doing your due diligence, and you actually can see it, then it is just about holding on for the ride. But there's always that like 1% itchy kind of suspicion that maybe you need to go do something else, And
but don't you think all the greats in anything have always had that?
I think so.
I think everyone's always has an element of self-doubt, always.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's part of like the human experience, right? Like you're gonna have self-doubt on everything because, like, for example, you'll always compare yourself with someone who's better in that moment in time. But the thing is, it's about like your potential, about your like maybe long-term strategy. Maybe like, for example, you might be, say if it was a point system, like today you have 3 points, someone else has 6, but you're working way more consistently than them and you're going to get to 10 before they get to 10, even though that you're in a higher position. They're in a higher position than you currently. It's more about like the long-term strategy and the consistency. But I think maybe like, obviously I'm speaking from a very generalized hypothetical kind of standpoint, but that's something that I like to believe in the sense that if you're really consistent with what you do and you just show up to certain things, like it's like going to the gym, right? As a comparison, like you could go once a week and lift super heavy, but you're not really going to build muscle. Like maybe you will, but not as much as if you went 3 times a week, or
Mm.
4 times, or 5 times, and then you add the diet to it, you know, you add the sleep to it, the recovery, all these little elements that will help improve the overall system. And maybe that's the same, like
That's
with entrepreneurialism, like
Yeah.
these feelings of stress that you currently have. Maybe it's like other people can't deal with that, you know, or someone refuses to do that and they quit halfway through or something, you know.
Oh, fair enough.
You know, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Maybe it's not cut. It's not
Maybe
everyone's
it's
cut
not
out
for
for
you,
it.
yeah.
It's not. It's like, for example, like I don't see myself really as an entrepreneur. Like I tried it before, and I just feel like it's not like I need a structure or anything like this, but I just feel like I never have found something that I love entirely. You know, where I'm at a point where I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna do that. That's who I am. You know, I'm just experimenting with different
Yeah.
things, whether that's working in like blockchain technology or like starting a podcast. You know, it's just it's an experimental phase for me.
Yeah,
So
for
it's
sure.
like I think you have to figure out who you are, and then you roll with that, and like you know what you like, you know what you want to bring to the table. So you're already in a position which is probably superior to most people's like current mindsets.
I hope so. But I also want to keep some of that, you know, I want to keep experimenting too. So hopefully I can just keep pushing through but also get a little bit of, you know, surprise myself something, you know, make some little experiments.
Yeah, indeed. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, are you good?
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with the podcast so far.
Yeah, thank you for having
Yeah,
me.
it's lovely.
It's been
Lovely.
great.
Should we do like some kind of handshake and like look at the camera and smile? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I
Okay.
can't even deal with you. Alright, thanks, man.
Man, thank you very much. That's cool, right?
That's a great experience. Oh my god. Let's see if let's make sure the camera allows it.
I wonder how long that was. I reckon it was like 45 minutes.
No, it's like 2 hours each.
Oh, whoa, an hour and 10.
Easy.
What do I press it? Pause? Wow, an hour, that's perfect.